Hello and welcome to this episode of the Band of One podcast. I am Riley Wilson, and this podcast is designed for anyone that wants to start, grow, or maintain an existing solo or small group performing career. I have over 50 years of live performance experience, including not only my tips, but the tips from other hardworking pros in their neck of the woods. The idea is to make this podcast entertaining, informative, and hopefully lucrative as an option to help you make more money. Let's get going.
Guitar Made Simpler, an intelligent approach, is the first all-new guitar method in years. Riley Wilson, veteran guitar teacher, writer, and performer, has taught this same material successfully to thousands of students since 1987. This logical approach will help anyone begin mastering the world's most popular instrument. A combination of formal notation with guitar tablature and included MP3 disc guarantee your success. Online video by the author demonstrating performing examples slowly and correctly. Start making real progress on the guitar. Order your copy today at guitarmadesimpler.com.
I've been remastering my collection of over 250 backing tracks for the umpteenth time and decided to dedicate an entire episode to this topic. While I realize that some of you won't benefit from some of this information, so many people are beginning to use backing tracks, and not just for a solo or duo act. It's become a viable part of live performance here in the 21st century, and I learned so many lessons the hard way. I'd like to share many of these tips and tricks to learn to help you to hopefully sound better and faster. There are several backing tracks user groups online, particularly on Facebook, and they have new members joining on a daily basis from all over the globe. Why? Simply put, backing tracks can help you sound better faster than any other single thing you can do, assuming you already know how to play and or sing on your chosen instrument. For those of you who are starting to scale, remember that backing tracks have been used live by some of the biggest groups in show business for over 50 years. If you've ever seen The Who play Baba O'Reilly or Won't Get Fooled Again live, they were using backing tracks. Ever seen Yes perform their opus Close to the Edge? They've used backing tracks the entire 18 minutes plus of that composition and have done so since 1972. Now, to be fair, both The Who and Yes play 99% of their own material live. They simply supplemented what they couldn't do on stage with additional parts. I played electric, acoustic, and pedal steel guitar on a theme park show in Carowinds in North Carolina in 1978. They also had a Broadway show, which had everything but drums, piano, and bass on a guide or backing track. They relied on 3 pit musicians and a conductor for that. The performance track even included backing vocals. And I remember talking with some of the singer-dancers on the cast that said that if they didn't feel like singing backup on a particular day, they just mouthed the words. We didn't have that luxury across the park at Harmony Hall. We played and sang live everything we did because we were doing a country music gig like the TV show Hee Haw. What's happened since the 1970s is that many acts that rely exclusively or supplementally on additional tracks get a bigger, fuller, more professional sound on these live shows. The most common question I see on a daily basis for people that join these backing tracks user groups is, where can I find backing tracks? This answer has changed quite a bit in 30 years. When I first moved to Texas in 1996, I met a couple of musicians that had literally thousands of General MIDI files of popular songs. It wasn't a problem to go out on the internet and search for, say, Boogie Wonderland and find a bunch of free General MIDI files of that particular tune. When the band Metallica and Napster fought it out in court many years later, easy access to General MIDI files disappeared. You can still locate them, but they're getting harder and harder to find. Getting a free General MIDI file is the easiest and cheapest way normally to get and or modify a backing track. If you're a keyboard player that's familiar with MIDI and MIDI files, you can often create your own, either on a keyboard workstation or on a computer. If you're a guitarist and have the software program Guitar Pro, you can often download Guitar Pro files that just happen to be General MIDI compatible. Imagine that. This is a marvelous way to get literally millions of songs for free. Another excellent option that we've discussed before on the podcast is Band in a Box. This program, created by jazz pianist Peter Gannon in 1985, has gone through dozens of iterations with almost yearly improvements. The new versions with real tracks can create amazing sounding songs in literally thousands of different styles. If you haven't checked it out, it's definitely worth a look. Many of my contemporaries are using this program worldwide. Essentially, it's a musical word processing program. You simply type in the chords to a song, click on a style, and hit play. Many solo and duo performers have their entire libraries built off Band in a Box files. And in fact, there are a couple of folks that sell these completed files you can buy online. One great feature of Band in a Box is the flexibility to change already completed songs, even after you gig with them. For example, I had performed Feliz Navidad on holiday shows the past 3 years. This year I heard Latin singer Mark Anthony do it, only with more of a samba style. So, that gave me an idea. I'd like to do that myself. I went back and created a samba version of it on Band in a Box. It worked out so well that I even did it at a retirement facility January 2nd. The other area that I personally don't mess with, but many of the other solo performers do, are karaoke tracks, or completed solo tracks you pay for. Jam Zone, karaoke version, on-song, and stage tracks seem to be the biggest as of 2026, and allow folks to download completed songs all ready to gig with. Most of these are fee-based membership services offering full-blown songs and even lyrics that can be sight-read from a laptop, tablet, or smartphone at the gig. Each of these products have their own fan bases, and if you want to jump into tracks quickly, this is a great way to begin. Once you begin assembling tracks, you will almost certainly want to adjust the key, parts played back, etc. As I noted before, I'm a huge fan of Apple's Logic Pro, and the ability they added this year to change keys of existing audio files was an enormous game changer. This stem splitter feature has really upped my game and allowed me to even add original recording backing tracks, remove parts, change keys, and the like. This way, adding new tunes takes much less time. Understand, if you've never worked with a DAW, or digital audio workstation, as it is sometimes called, there is a learning curve involved. I've recommended for my guitar students, as well as any musician in the 21st century, to learn at least a little about home-based recording. This changed my life over 20 years ago when I was able to actually begin recording voiceovers in my home without driving to a commercial studio. I'm also a commercial voice talent. The quality has improved so much then that you can literally begin and make records at home. If you're just getting into this, an inexpensive way might be to simply buy a used Macintosh computer. In fact, anything made since 2003 already has their iconic GarageBand program installed. Buy a used audio interface that's usually USB or similar compatible, and you can literally plug your guitar, bass, keyboard, or what have you directly in and start recording. In fact, there were many records made over 20 years ago just using GarageBand. Just like the TEAC 3340 4-track reel-to-reel tape deck allowed musicians in the early 1970s to record and overdub at home, modern digital recording lets you record almost as many tracks as you can dream up. For backing tracks, you're seldom going to need more than 12 to 14 tracks, and sometimes only 1 or 2 are necessary. Thanks to Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and more, you can often learn how to use these programs with a little effort at zero cost. That wasn't the case in 2003. I'm going to share a couple of huge tips now that should make a big difference in the trajectory of your success with your solo or small group. First, mix all backing tracks in mono. I can't emphasize that too much. When you create a mono track, it doesn't matter if you have a speaker on a stick to 3 or 4 speakers. Everyone hears the exact same thing. Mixing is much easier in mono, and in fact, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys always mixed in mono. Keep in mind, we're not preparing something for a major label release. We're recording backing tracks in order to sound full and polished on a gig. I have recordings that I've done going back 10 or 15 years or longer and can hear the better quality as I've developed my skills as a recording engineer and musician. This reminds me of an amusing story about Hartley Peavey. Story goes that back in the 80s, he ran into a musician who was a bit of a snob about Peavey gear. He told Hartley, I tried your stuff back in the 70s and it was awful. Hartley then asked him, has your guitar playing gotten better in the last 15 years? The guy said, yes. He said, so did we. This isn't a plug for Peavey, but simply remind you that you have to start somewhere. And once you begin, keep working at getting better as you do. The second one, know your gear. This is every bit as important as being a good instrumentalist, vocalist, etc. Learning a DAW or other software requires a learning curve, and you simply have to be willing to put in the time in order to do so. It can be very rewarding, but it does require you make the effort. Another little trick is to use a 30-cycle roll-off on all mixed recordings. You might even want to roll the bass off at 40 cycles if you don't use a subwoofer. This will ensure that your finished tracks don't have bass frequencies your live speakers can't reproduce. This will pay off big time on those few gigs you have your system cranked as loud as it will go. It never fails. Every year, I booked 2 or 3 shows where I could easily have had twice or 3 times the PA system that I bring with me. And I'm really grateful for this little tip. It prevents my sound from being muddy, even up to the full volume of my sound system. Another great way to do this is to find 2 or 3 different people that make online training videos to explain how to mix and record on your chosen DAW of choice. As a Logic Pro user, I enjoy anything from Sean Devine, Chris Vandeviver of Why Logic Pro Rules, Colin Caparoon, Chris Sangster, etc. Brian Tracy says when you can learn from an expert on any subject, you save yourself years of struggling in order to create a better product. I have learned about recording, mixing, and mastering from some of the brightest minds in the business, which has allowed me to create a truly excellent show. This, in turn, has helped me to win multiple awards online, which helps me to continue to book more work. Abraham Lincoln reportedly said, "Every man is my superior in that I can learn something from him." This advice has worked splendidly in my life, and I suggest you consider adopting it with your own business development. Because I have a large library of over 250 tracks, whenever I choose to remix one song, I was choosing to devote the next month or 2 to remixing everything else. And this ends up consuming a tremendous amount of time. And to be honest, I spend more time working and editing tracks in here than I do on my guitar playing or vocals. Some people won't agree with that, and they're entitled to their opinion. However, as a singing guitarist, the backing tracks of drums, bass, other guitars, keys, strings, horn parts, as well as backup vocals, ending up making what I do when playing guitar and singing live only a small portion of what the audience hears. I've always tried to envision what my show looks and sounds like from the audience's perspective. Since I play everything from private parties to corporate events to open to the public shows, as well as 55 and over communities and retirement facilities, I have to do my best to ensure that I go over the very best I can, regardless of the audience. This means paying particular attention to my backing tracks and making them sound the very best that I can. I happen to love recording, mixing, and mastering in my home studio, so this is time well spent, at least to me. Now, let's address the other side of the coin. I'm sure many of you, after listening to this podcast, have decided, heck no, I'm not going down that rabbit hole. Part of me doesn't blame you. I could have had a lot more songs than I do for each gig and be even more current than I am at the moment. I wouldn't have to worry about mixes before or after the gig. Some of my friends, like John Byron Haney, who did my approach with tracks for years, then went back to using just guitar and vocals. He still remains very busy, and he seems to enjoy this approach just as much as he did singing with tracks. Personally, I think this decision is based on what you hear when you listen to music. Think about that for a moment. When you listen to a piece of music for the first time or the 100th time, what do you focus on? I worked with a very good keyboard player many years ago who really listened more to bass lines than he ever did piano or keyboard parts. He ended up playing bass with some groups as well as keyboards, but that was his orientation. When he listened to a song for the first or the 100th time, he listened to the bass line. For me, I loved mid-60s rock and roll and hear everything, the percussion, the guitars and bass, the voices, etc. I can't bear not to have all of that behind me when I'm singing. Therefore, not only do I embrace tracks, I love them. Finally, you don't have to completely change your show to begin using tracks. If you're a keyboard player or a guitarist and want to try using tracks, get 2 or 3 and add them to the show. Watch the audience's reaction. I suspect they will love it, and it might end up becoming your new approach as well. That's all for today's episode. I'm Riley Wilson, and thanks for joining us here on the Band of One podcast. If you have ideas for future podcasts or would like to be profiled on the podcast, reach out and get in touch with me through my webpage, which is guitarmadesimpler.com. You can also reach me through the facebook.com/Band of One podcast page. See you next time. I'm Riley Wilson.